Your journey has been an interesting one up to here. You've questioned so much more than those around you. You've even questioned yourself as to how you could have grown into these thoughts. Am I crazy? When did I begin to think differently? Why do people in general appear so limited in their thought process? Rest assured, you are not alone. The world is slowly waking up to what you already know inside, yet can't quite verbalize. Welcome to the Spiritual Dope Podcast. The show that answers the questions you never even knew to ask, but needed the answers to. Questions about you, this world, the people in it. Most importantly, how do I proceed now moving forward? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we sure do love living in the question. Time for another hit of Spiritual Dope with your host, Brandon Henley. Let's get right into today's episode.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, Spiritual Dope, and thanks for tuning in today. We have a special guest for you today, Fatima Nathan, and she is a neuroscientist, entrepreneur, professional life coach, counselor, illustrator, content creator, and author who strives to uplift the consciousness of humanity as she believes that everyone deserves a chance to be a kick-ass version of themselves. Through awakening, she uses vibrational energy to practice Tai Chi, yoga, and is extremely outdoorsy, where she spends time meditating as well. Fatima, thanks for being on today.
Thank you for hosting me, Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. So I usually like to start these whole things off with the idea that you and I we're basically just vessels for energy, right? Cosmic energy, creative energy, whatever you want to call it, right? We're connected to Source, and Source is flowing through us to one of our listeners today, right? And this message can only be delivered through you, through this medium, to that listener. What is that message that's coming through you today, Fatima?
I guess the message that comes today is that we are all constantly always part of an energy of a universe. It's always existent and we are part of it. And in order to be part of it, we need to let go, let loose, and just realize that it's much more than what it seems. It's just about being present in the moment and living in it. And you realize there's much more.
Yeah, no, I love it, right? The whole idea that there is much more, and I guess a lot of that's predicated on being present and trying to become aware of, like, what is it? Because I know I always tell the story of, like, when I was growing up, my mom, she was always like, well, you've got to be aware, and there's awareness. And I'm like, I'm totally aware, like, of everything outside of me.
Right, yeah.
Because because I'm like, do you see me bumping into walls? I'm not bumping into any walls. I see everything, right?
Right.
But I think that of course now 30 years goes by, and you're like, I think that the awareness that she was trying to talk about was this internal awareness and this awareness and connection to Source. Is that what you're talking about?
So I wouldn't exactly say that everybody is able. Okay, let's look at it in a scope that everybody's walking their daily lives. You can't expect everybody to say you have to be connected to Source. But you got to be present in a moment, in a time. We're so busy in our daily lives that we wake up and we do our daily things, and we don't realize that it actually requires energy to stay awake, to get up, to walk. But if we were to take a moment in time just to stand in a place at a time and close our eyes and just feel, we will realize that it's much more than all of it. And it comes down to the fact that when you are present, you actually feel a lot more, and that's what keeps you going, that keeps you alive, I guess. So at that point it becomes, how far are you willing to step out of what you are running in your daily lives? I guess it comes down to everybody always looking at their devices, looking at their phones, walking around like as if they don't look around, right? But if you just take a moment at a time and look, listen, and feel, it's much more than what we actually experience.
Okay. No, look, I agree, right? There's a lot more going on than we, even give anything to. And I think that especially in your field, right, neuroscience and your studies, you also realize that, like, we're typically only able to tune into like such a small percentage of what's even available, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but I know that we see like, probably less than 1% of all visual spectrum. We probably hear less than, same type of thing. Super curious about like, coming from your space, what was it like for you to tune into, your own spiritual awareness, this deeper level of consciousness, and how does that juxtapose with the science?
Yeah. So on average, so as to speak, the human brain only is used at a percentage of 3. So that includes all your functions just by itself. So if you look at it, much of the brain is not actually being put into use. And I do believe that part of it is actually consciousness, to be able to use that and to create much more is another thing. So how did I do it? It took a long time. I had to actually move into my own space, like eliminate myself from the noise in the world and just sit down. And I guess at that point, when you're speaking about vibration, when you're speaking about energy, when you're speaking about anything of that matter, you just got to sit. And you got to eliminate yourself from the noise. Yeah, it's not easy. And you can even do it when there's people present and there's every day. You just got to sit and you got to just be in sense of self. So to tell you, if you tell that to a normal person, they'll say, oh, it's a bit difficult. How do you do that? I mean, you go through everyday life and everything. But I guess to achieve a higher state of consciousness, it requires your mind to actually shut off from the normal. And you can...
Yeah. When you say that, are you talking about shutting off like the prefrontal cortex, like shutting off the executive mind function?
Yeah. So when we say that, we're trying to say shut off your thoughts. Shut off what's going to happen next. What do I need to do next? What's coming next? What's going next? Just shut it off for a while, for a second. Just do that. And when you shut off that part of your mind, you realize it's very difficult. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. But if you just focused on your breathing, that's a way that you actually can't shut it down, because you're actually counting how much you breathe in and how much you breathe out. And that by itself makes it thoughtless. And when you do that, you don't need to think about anything, because that by itself is energy. So, yeah, it initially started that way for me. And then eventually I went further into meditation, and I developed a lot of techniques when it came to Tai Chi and yoga and stuff. And it wasn't about a workout or what I was going to gain from it. It was just about movement and energy and how you work with it. So you got to start from really basic. Just imagine if you were born and you couldn't breathe. When a child is born, the child cries first. It's not because of anything. It's because the child is trying to gasp for air for the first time. And eventually, as the child learns to breathe, it gains a higher state of consciousness. So it works the same way. It's about becoming alive again by starting from scratch.
I love that idea and that concept. And what's really cool for me right now, what you're saying is that, I teach breathwork. I host and facilitate breathwork, right? And that's been definitely been my perception for myself, has been when we do this breathwork, when we do the counting, we have to be 100% present, because we are focused on the counting, we're focused on the type of breathing, and that eliminates any other thoughts from happening, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I guess the idea too is, our prefrontal cortex or our thinking mind can only really hold about 4 things in mind at like one time, right? Like give or take.
Right.
And so,
Right.
once we're counting, we're breathing, we've got like all this other stuff going on. We've got about 4 things happening, right? We're trying to like, I'm supposed to breathe from my belly and expand over here and, and do all this other stuff. And be totally present to this movement, and what you're saying is what I'm hearing you say is too is like this kind of unlocks and allows that energy to be there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to say that, but I'm also trying to relay a message to everyone that they don't realize that they're constantly breathing. If someone were to take a moment to actually focus on how they breathe, that by itself, whether it comes from the stomach, whether it comes from the diaphragm, wherever it comes from, the lungs, it doesn't matter. It just goes down to just focusing on that, because it's very simple. Even if someone is anxious, regardless of whether they understand what we're trying to relay or not, everyone always says, just stop, take a second, breathe, and it works.
No, I believe, right, exactly.
Yeah.
In any instance, if you're kind of caught up in everything, every moment and all the things, and you just pay attention to your breath at all.
Right.
Doesn't matter where it's coming from, doesn't matter what's happening, but you're like, breath, right? So
right.
That's where you're at with that. So, how does it, how do you go from, being this kind of pure science person, right, and into spirituality? I mean, are they separate or are they together? Have we done a disservice by keeping them separate for so long? What are your thoughts there?
So I guess if you want to see, people are now trying to build a scope between spirituality and science, especially neuroscience, because they're trying to link most of it with the mind. But I guess it comes from the concept of, I would say that the mind is always existent. You need to leave it, but in order to step into spirituality, you have to come from a space from the heart. So you need to leave the mind, come to the heart, in order to come back to your mind and create that connection again. So it's not about the brain. We're speaking about the mind. So when you speak about the brain, we're talking about all your thoughts, your reactions, your everyday. When we speak about the mind, we're actually speaking about using it in the right way. What are you going to do? Use it to think, create an outcome. That's the separate part of the mind. It gets to tell you whether it's positive or negative, whether you take the left or whether you take the right. But there's no wrong or right in this. When it comes to science and spirituality, everyone's going to keep fighting for the rest of time. I mean, it's like any other field for that matter. But how did I come out of this? I guess I had my own life experiences. I spent a lot of time chasing the field, studying a lot, thinking that was what I wanted in life. And I had my own life experiences that made me realize that there's much more. And I went seeking and searching. But when I did that, I asked from my soul. I actually stepped away from the mind and I took my own time. I sat down by myself and I really asked from my soul. So it took about 2 years. It took about 2 years in order to dissociate from something and really connect with a deeper sense of self. It required a higher state of consciousness, and you got to know there are things that will fall off, people that will fall off, situations that will fall off, but you got to be ready for all of it, because all it welcomes is the new. And at that point, you know that when you separate the science part of it that people talk about brain and, they can't explain most of it. And when you come to spirituality, this is something that is unexplainable. Try as you may, everyone can speak as they can, but everyone gets to experience it. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Sure. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is there's really no current strong linear lines to science and spirituality, right? That's been kind of discussed.
No.
Now, even in saying higher state of consciousness, is that a scientific line that we can use, or is that just kind of like internal feeling, sense of self that we get to, or is this something that we can put on a scale and be like, oh yeah, it looks like you're just below like level 33, and a couple more weeks and you should have it?
No. So I always say this: consciousness is good enough. Just being conscious. You don't have to have a level. There's no level. Even spiritual people never reach 100 anyway. They don't have all the answers. They're never going to reach 100%. There's no limit. That's the thing about spirituality. But when it comes to science, I guess what they try to do is they try to put a number to it. They try to say consciousness, highest state of consciousness. So an example would be if someone in the operation theater, and what happens is they don't wake up from a coma, and but they can still hear people talking to them. And if you hear when they come out, they always say, yeah, I heard you, but I couldn't respond in any way. But there's no answer to that can be given. If you ask science, they'll say, oh, that was the highest state of consciousness. But there's nothing that they can put a number on saying, yeah, this is solid foundation. So just like they can't, neither can we. So there never is a number.
Got it. So we're kind of at a point of we all agree that it's there, but we don't agree on what it is. And since we can't quantify it, right? It makes it hard to science. I'm sure that's improper grammar, but so interesting. One of the things that I saw on your site too was kind of like this linking with the heart and the mind. And that was a big part of my own journey. And I think that I don't know what the Buddhist line is for that, or the Chinese word, or I think in other languages, when they talk about the heart, they actually mean the heart and the mind connected at the same time.
Right.
And you get into like Western cultures, such as America and I guess England, where the two words are separate. Right. And so in doing so, we've created that separation versus some other cultures where when you say heart, you mean the heart and the mind, you mean that connection. I'm curious to understand in your field, and if you've come across this yourself. I think I watched the show. I'm asking you like all the science questions I've got now.
It's fine.
There's I guess there was a show that I'd watched where they talked about I guess they have found that there's a cluster of about 40,000 cells, or like the heart actually has like a little bit of a brain, and oftentimes signals will go from the heart, and the heart will react before the mind actually processes. What's happening?
Right. So, you know how they say that when people's heart fails, sometimes they put a pacemaker. So the heart generally has a pacemaker by itself. It's called a sinus node, right? And this is generally like the heart's brain. It knows when to pump, how to pump, and how many pumps in a lifetime it's gonna make. It comes made as such, but what we do along the way can either extend it, or it can either decrease its life. So generally, the heart is the only organ in the body not connected to the brain, in the sense that it runs the entire thing. In order for the brain to function, the brain needs the heart before the heart needs the brain, because that's where you get the oxygen from in order for your brain to work, right? So it's one of the organs that, it's actually the only organ, it's not one of the organs. It's actually the only organ that works that way. So when it comes down to what you were trying to ask, yes, it does have a brain of its own. That's why it's segregated for the rest of the organs, yeah.
Well, how interesting is that? And so, I guess the other piece too, right, is that again, this is some show I watched, either YouTube or Gaia or something else like that.
Right.
They talked about, like, again, the brain or the heart, I guess, transmitting like a fear signal or a happy signal, or an event is like coming. Like, I guess, what are they saying? Like the heart processes up to like 6 seconds sooner than the brain.
Right.
So
I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where I say, when you come from tapping into a higher state of consciousness, or consciousness by itself, you're coming from a heart. What do I mean by that is that you're opening up to what we all have. It's called intuition. It's something that we all know that's going to happen before it happens. But truth be told, even people who are in the normal world, who are, let's say, they are, when I mean the normal world, what I'm trying to say is that they're not so in tune to stepping away. They're living their daily lives, and they have a sense that something's not right, something's going to happen, or something great is going to happen. But they say it's in their gut, because the rhythm they feel is closer to the diaphragm, but it's all in tune with the heart. So what exactly that is that sense that it feels, it's called intuition. So the signals are from there. So just imagine if you were to step back and open up entirely to consciousness and then reach that part. So can you imagine how much more you can feel?
Yeah, 100%, right?
Yeah.
I'm terrible at opening up to that much, because honestly, like, sometimes when you open up, you're like, whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of, I don't know, and you better tap the brakes on that, because what do we do with that much, right? So when we're opening up and to consciousness, are we saying, like, is this it's opening up to a feeling, it's opening up to an energy? Is consciousness the mind, or vice versa? What are your thoughts there?
So, like I always say, consciousness requires the mind and the heart to work together. If the heart is too open, you take in too much. If the mind is too open, you don't take in anything at all. If both are connected, you reach a state of balance, and that state of balance is called the yin and the yang. And that's what's very necessary. There needs to be dark with light. If not, neither can exist, but in equilibrium, they exist literally in Zen.
So we're seeking, what we're looking for is some type of balance. And in your experience, how people been able to make this connection and establish a balance?
Okay, so far, whoever I deal with to help in these kind of situations, everybody goes through everything. What I try to say is that you got to start with self. You got to start with dealing with what's in your mind first. You got to start with you're worthy. You know, you got to forgive yourself. You got to learn to love. You got to figure out things and life situations which you're encountering step by step in order to overcome that. Opening the heart is always later. Dealing with the mind comes first. You got to deal with what you're facing, whether it's past, present, and how you can overcome that. And then when you step and leave that completely, then you move into the heart. So it's a step by step. You got to start only with self first. It has no time. There is no time to it, but your life situations aren't a place for you to feel like, oh, what have I done? Or, oh, what have I lost? It's about how can I use it to face the present?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that as I continue to do these studies, that's what I found, right?
Right.
Through every resource, either like the business field, right?
Right.
Or through the spiritual seeking, right?
Right.
Or psychology. This is a similar, a real similar story that says, hey, stop looking at everything like it's a shit show and start seeing what it is that it's teaching you, right? Like,
right.
what are you learning here, and how can you use this for your own evolution or for some way to move yourself forward, right? So I think that the plan that you're laying out works really well for the person that is already like kind of like open-minded or just kind of like in the head. What about the person that's already like over we what do we call them? We call them like these empaths, right? These people that are super sensitive from their heart already. So how do we help them to course correct and get up into their head a little bit?
Yeah, so most of them are like that. So you see a lot of people who are also like that, and you also see a lot of people who are blocked. So when it comes to people who are more like open, empaths, right? And it starts with patience. You got to work with them, and you got to tell them, rather than starting from the mind, you got to treat with them from the heart. Because in their space, that's so much open. That's where sensitivity comes from, right? How they react and how they're affected and their emotions. So you got to work from their heart. And at that point, when you realize if someone is very sensitive, when it comes to those terms, it means a lot of emotions, which means although it comes from the heart, the main blockage is in the heart. So that itself is a key. Not having opened it, that they have caged it because of some experiences. So you got to be really gentle with them, and how you tune with them and how you work with them is a bit different. So for them, I guess what they need to see is how to open bit by bit. They lack the trust in that sense. So one person is through the mind, but the other person is through the heart.
Well, I think it's awesome, right?
Right.
Because again, the main blockage is still in the heart, right?
Right.
Is what I'm hearing you say, and
Yeah.
I love to dig into it. Like, so you're saying like because of the lack of trust or something that's happened to them, it's actually still like their emotions are still kind of caged in, right? They're still kind of like and the I guess their reactions are just kind of like I guess I would say that I feel like they're more open, right, and overly sensitive. But is it because it's so compressed and tight in there? And
Yeah. So, yeah, people who are overly sensitive, it's because it's so caged because of what they've experienced, that any small reaction that people create, that they've been hurt so much, or that they have experienced life situations, that even the slightest thing would trigger them. And that's when you know that, yeah, that's a starting point for them by itself. And majority of the people that you come across, almost everybody has their heart caged.
No, that's interesting, right? So let's talk about how we open that bit by bit. What do you have for us?
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to the heart, like I always say, it's one of the most precious things, even in our body for that matter, if you speak scientifically. But seriously speaking, I guess from a tune point, I always say this: start from self, start from your mind, treat yourself first, face what you need to face, and do what you need to do. You don't need to start from the heart first. Just solve whatever you need to solve. Do your situation bit by bit, and then when it comes to the heart, that's going to be the toughest, and you're going to be the first one to run. And it's going to take a while. But it all starts from, if you take one step a day, just one step a day to make a decision. Like maybe you say today, when it comes to the heart, you'll say, maybe you never trust people for anything, for that matter. And you meet a stranger and someone says something simple. Okay, it's not a big deal. And you say, okay, maybe, why not? Or I always tell people this: why don't you start this way? For once, tap out of your mind. Once you solve the mind part, tap out of your mind and say, let me listen to what my intuition is helping me. And I say, if it seems so hard, always think of it this way. A child starts to crawl, and then the child learns to walk. But no one has told the child, get up and walk. It's an instinct, right? And when the child falls, the child stands up by himself or herself and continues walking. So who are we to say we can't try another step?
No, I love it. I was actually thinking about it yesterday in real similar terms, right? Just all these things that we're trying to do or accomplish. And I think one of the challenges is that we live in this always on instantaneous society.
Right.
I can order anything I want, and I can have it here today.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
I want to watch any movie in the world. I can watch it right
now.
Right now. And so I think that we've become more and more conditioned to like this instant gratification, and like super inexpensive, super easy to us, and that when we're faced with something that smells a little bit like it could be work, without like immediate gratification, right? We're kind of put off.
Right.
So how do we, share and show the benefits of, I don't know, transcending this need for immediate gratification for something that nobody can describe, but we've been told is so amazing.
Right. So I guess when it comes to that, one thing we got to remember, it's very simple. I always tell people this. It seems like something that's really far-fetched. It seems like what most spiritual people experience is like, oh, look, I need to spend hours meditating. I need to step out of my fears. I need to do that. Yeah, everybody needs to do that. But I always say, look at it this way. When you chose a job or a country to move to or any situation, did you not step out from that fear? Did you not take a chance? Did you not make the extra effort? Every company says you have about 3 months, 1 month, 3 months of a probation period. It's not guaranteed. Yet you leave your job and you do it. Yet you make that chance. You get married, you have children. You don't know the end of the outcome. So if you live in that world and you think you can do it, what's so difficult from doing what doesn't require effort? It's effortless, truly, to just step out from all these things that we keep putting too much energy into, and just be instead in an energy that literally vibrates with us.
Yeah, I actually had, one of my Breathwork students, reach out this past week talking about feeling her whole body vibrating. Right. Just getting connected to source. I mean, so there's there is this higher vibration that you get tapped into that something else is out there. And when you tap into it, it's mind blowing. Right. And she said, quite literally, she goes, now I see why people become monks or nuns or devote their lives to this, because it's why wouldn't you, right? And I think that I'm in the middle of reading a book that is somewhere not next to me that just talks about that once you learn some of these tools, just like you're doing right now, once you've learned these tools, once you've connected, once you've figured out kind of how it's working, you're compelled to go share it. Right? You're like, wow, listen, let's talk about this thing that nobody's talking about. Let's go talk about this. And what's interesting is to me is that people have been talking about it all the time.
Right. That's true.
We just haven't been at that level of awareness. It's been like, oh, well, normally be like, well, that's for those people over there, right? That's great for them. That's great for them. I'm on my way to get a latte. I got other shit to do today, right? And this other thing you talk about though too is that I think a lot of people feel like you've got to sit in lotus position for 2 hours a day, like you're talking about, but it can be done in, I don't know,
just walking.
Sure.
You can walk.
Yeah. So that's so cool. I mean, it's really interesting too, and it's great that I think to see somebody like yourself who, you're a real neuroscientist, right? It's not like this is detached, and it's not like I think what we've been used to again is people who have plugged into the spiritual life. They're a monk, they're a hippie, they're they're off the grid. They're I think it's really important, and I'd be curious to see for you, are you seeing more spirituality in everybody's life? Have you noticed, for me, I feel like a big part of this surge, I'd say, in spirituality, again, it's always been around us, but comes from COVID, right? A worldwide pandemic, a reason for people to connect, right? Be like, hey, wait a second, I need to tap into this sense of self and really kind of embrace it and understand more about it.
Right. So when it comes to that concept, I guess it's called the period of isolation. That's when it is. So when there's an isolation, you're secluded from the world, right? So what are you going to do? You got nothing to do. Face yourself. You got no choice. Figure out your life. What has happened? Because everyone went through a situation that was unimaginable, right? You can't go out. You can't do anything. So face yourself. So I guess as the years are passing, what is trying to happen here is that even the universe works through tapping through a higher state of consciousness for more people. And if you realize, more and more people are coming into it, and they're at least making the effort to figure it out. And we as individuals, just like you run a podcast, and you're spiritual yourself, and you do a lot of work, and it's the same way. So most people are just normal. We're not sitting and we're not, saying mantras and praying beads or anything like that. We're just normal individuals running our daily lives, and we meet people along the way, and we build a connection with them, and we try to do our best to relay the message and help with the universe to build a greater state of consciousness just for the collective.
Yeah, I mean, it really goes to the beginning of the podcast, right? Like the universe is kind of working through us, right? And how is it working through us? And it's kind of like how are we going to express that, right? How are we going to express our spirituality, and whatever's inside of us essentially has to be expressed, right?
Right.
In the same way that I guess an oak tree expresses an oak tree. A daffodil expresses a daffodil.
Daffodil,
we just have to express whatever's inside of us, and neither one is like there's no specific way to do it, but it's going to happen, right?
Yeah,
really
each one has to be different. If not, you can't touch so many lives around the world. Every spiritual person comes up with their own way, their own method, and it has to work differently. If everybody were the same, nobody's gonna listen. That truth be told, that'll be the fact.
Yeah. Well, so you're also offering like some services through your website. Where what type of people are you working with? Like, who should reach out to you to connect?
Yeah, so I always say this: there's no particular type of person, as long as you're open. And most importantly, you want that change, and you want to start somewhere. Just saying that you want something different and to start, you can connect at my website.
Okay. And exactly. The idea and the desire, right, to make that transition, right? And I think that's really where it happens. I think you had said, hey, hook me up with my soul. Where's my soul? I want to.
Right.
And for me, I still vividly recall, it was about 4 or 5 years ago now, writing that question, to the universe, right? Like writing that question, handwritten, be like, all right, show me. Right? And like within weeks, like it was like full on, like I was like, all right, stop.
Yeah. You do reach that point. But like I always tell people, it's got to start from there. And more importantly, you got to be open to it. Yeah. I can't give you all the answers if you're not going to make the effort. You can't do anything if you don't take an action.
Right. No, 100%. One other thing that I wanted to hit on too, and until just now, we always talk about the self, right? Searching for the self, disassociating the self from this other thing, and all these other, when you talk about the self, and trying to find out who the self is, who am I? Like, I know that growing up, like, well, clearly I'm right here. This is the self. I know exactly who I am, right? And it transitions later in life to mean something entirely different. So when you're talking about the self, what do you mean?
So when I speak about the self, I always speak about, who are you now? I always say that. Who are you now? Because even if I asked you that question, Brandon, and I said, who are you now? You would give me an answer. But no one has the answer to who you can be in the future, what you can build further from where you are. And I always say this, if you want to know self, just ask yourself, who are you now? And then from there, go, who do I want to become? That itself builds an entire different universe.
Yeah. I mean, look, you open yourself up to the possibilities, right?
Right.
Because it's if you run around and be like, I am this, I am this, I am this, then you keep reinforcing that same story over and over and over.
Exactly.
And that's who you are. But then when you say, hey.
Yeah. So when you say, who am I? You got to say, why am I actually here? What is my purpose?
Yeah.
What is my purpose? You are not going to get an answer, but you will realize the possibilities that open up just by asking that question from the depth of your heart.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. So we're at this little point where I like to ask a couple different questions. I like to think of this podcast is kind of like spiritual speed dating, right? Fatima, right now that's tuned into this podcast and they're like, I'm looking for my next spiritual date.
All right.
So in essence of that, spiritual bachelorette number one, what are we all so afraid of?
Ourselves. Everyone is afraid to face themselves. That's the biggest fear that they would have. How much they would give and what they would get in return. They think it's from the other person more, but it's actually themselves that they fear the most.
No, I definitely see it. Look, I mean, myself included, right? There's always things that I fear about myself. Either success or failure or anything.
Right. Because we're constantly thinking, right?
But that goes back to back to what you're talking about, like starting with the mind first. Like, how do we, determine, how do you say, hey, you're worthy, forgive. Learn how to love and then get to your heart later, right? But those are the things that like we fear ourselves because we've created, for some reason, somehow, we've turned ourselves into a monster.
Right.
And it's like, all right, well, am I actually the boogeyman? And sometimes we feel that we are, and instead of kind of doing the work and facing ourselves because we're afraid of what we think we've created, right? We can get in there, and the best term that I've seen for it is called do that shadow work, right? Like who have you hidden away that inside of yourself that could use some love, right? And allow for that.
Yeah. So I always tell people, just do this. Why do you create situations in your head when it is non-existent? It's pointless. Why do you think of something when it doesn't even exist? Then you literally manifest it into your life.
Well, it becomes easier to see because you primed your mind for it, right? You said,
right,
you're like, here's the directions for a shitty day I'd like to have, right?
Yeah, and then you got it. You know how people manifest things and they get good stuff? Yeah, there are people who manifest things in the reverse way as well.
No, 100%, right? Because that's what we've set our mind filters too, right? We set just like we're Google and any database. We say, okay, what are the filters? What are the filters? And what am I searching for, right? So,
right.
Where I got one more for you. Let's figure it out. Look for a fun one. Ooh. What is your one wish for the world, Fatima?
Peace and love. That's literally, it's like Bob Marley in the real world. Okay, if you could live a life with a man who spoke so much truth and who had so much wisdom and captions, it's living him in a real world. Literally. Just being connected with everyone. So peace and love looks like this. You don't need to go out there. You don't need to go and change the world. You don't need to change war. You don't need to give you extra. Stop with a stranger on the street. Smile. Say hello. Acknowledge. Live a Bob Marley life.
So just be decent and kind. the other.
Yeah,
Right? I mean,
exactly.
Sure. No, for sure. So, Fatima, Nathan, thank you so much for being on today. For the
Thank you.
Catch the website. It's www.f as in Frank or Fatima in this manner. MNA1808.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Spiritual Dope Podcast. Stay connected with us directly through spiritualdope.co. You can also join the discussion on Facebook, Spiritual Dope, and Instagram at spiritual_dope. If you would like to speak with us, send us an email through brandon@spiritualdope.co. And as always, thank you for cultivating your mindset and creating a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking part of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, be kind to yourself and trust your intuition.